At a lavish dinner in Paris, my husband's father, the millionaire CEO, mocked my small startup. Can't even afford a proper office. She's my biggest mistake. Suddenly, his top client stood up. Actually, that's my daughter. I smiled as my father-in-law's face turned pale. Because he had no idea I was the one pulling the strings. Can't even afford a proper office. She's my biggest mistake. I froze mid-sip, my champagne glass halfway to my lips as Dominic Reynolds' booming voice silenced all conversation at our table. The lavish Parisian restaurant suddenly felt suffocating. Business partners, industry executives, and my husband Austin all turned to stare at me. Some with pity, others with poorly concealed amusement. Dominic, my father-in-law and CEO of Reynolds' footwear empire, didn't even look at me as he continued addressing his guests. My son could have married anyone. Instead, he chose someone who thinks selling homemade dresses online is a business. My knuckles turned white around my glass. 3 years of his constant criticism had prepared me for this moment, but the public humiliation still stung. Austin shifted uncomfortably beside me but remained silent. His defense of me had disappeared months ago. But what Dominic didn't know, what none of them knew, was that this dinner would change everything. 6 months earlier, I sat on the floor of my small work area, a converted storage room in our apartment that served as Lucid Design's headquarters. Fabric samples surrounded me while my laptop displayed disappointing sales figures. A clothing line I'd poured my heart into wasn't connecting with customers, and our savings were dwindling fast. The door opened and Austin walked in, loosening his tie. "Hey, Dad called. Dinner at his place tonight at 7. I didn't look up. I need to finish inventory and update the website. Tell him I can't make it. Lucy, please." Austin's voice carried that familiar tension. He just secured the Miller contract. "It's a big night for the company." "It's always a big night for the company," I muttered, but I recognized the look on Austin's face. He wouldn't stand up to his father, not tonight or any night. "Fine. I'll be ready by 6:30. Dominic's mansion stood as a constant reminder of what Austin was expected to inherit and what I was expected to appreciate being connected to. I smoothed my simple black dress before following Austin through the imposing front door. There he is. Dominic embraced Austin firmly, completely ignoring me until social etiquette forced acknowledgement. "And Lucy? Still working on that little clothing project?" "Lucid Designs increased online orders by 15% this quarter," I replied with a forced smile. Dominic smirked. 15% of nothing is still nothing, sweetheart." Austin said nothing, just led me toward the dining room. Throughout dinner, Dominic praised Austin's contributions to Reynolds footwear while occasionally tossing condescending comments my way. "When are you two giving me grandchildren?" he asked, his gaze fixed on me. "Surely that little shop isn't worth postponing a family for." Before I could respond, Austin jumped in. "We're focusing on our careers right now, Dad." "Your career," Dominic corrected, pointing directly at Austin. "Lucy's hobby shop hardly counts. If she'd just take the position in our marketing department, you two could afford a proper house instead of that apartment." I'd heard this suggestion, more like command, since we married. Work for Dominic, abandon my dreams, become another Reynolds puppet. I stayed quiet, a skill I'd perfected at these dinners. The next morning, while sorting through bills, I found an unmarked envelope. Inside was a handwritten note that sent me stumbling backward. Asterisk, "Lucy, you don't know me, but I am your biological father. My name is Skylar Davidson. I've been searching for you for years. If you're willing to meet, here's my number." I called my Aunt Beth immediately. She had raised me after my mother died when I was 8. "Did you know about this?" I demanded when she answered. "That my father was looking for me?" The silence on the line confirmed my suspicion before Beth finally spoke. "He contacted me last year. I told him to leave you alone." "You had no right," I said, surprising myself with the anger in my voice. "He abandoned you and your mother when you were a baby," Beth replied defensively. "Now he wants back in your life? I was protecting you. Mom always said he couldn't handle responsibility. That he was a nobody." "Your mother was protecting you from feeling rejected," Beth said gently. "He wasn't a nobody. He chose his business ambitions over family. And apparently he succeeded beyond anyone's expectations." For 3 days I carried his number everywhere, taking it out, putting it away, arguing with myself. Austin thought meeting him was a bad idea. He abandoned you, Lucy. What could he possibly offer now? Answers, I replied simply. I have a right to those. The cafe I chose was quiet, tucked away from the busier parts of town. I arrived early, ordering coffee I couldn't drink as I watched the door. When a tall man with silver-streaked dark hair and startlingly familiar green eyes walked in, I knew immediately. Lucy. His voice was hesitant. We sat in awkward silence before he began his explanation. Skylar Davidson had left my mother believing he couldn't provide properly for us. He'd intended to build something substantial in return. Pride kept him working, ambition kept him focused, and eventually shame kept him away until it was too late. When I finally gathered the courage to come back, your mother had passed away and you were gone, he explained, genuine pain in his eyes. It took years to find you. Why now? I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Because I learned the hard way that success means nothing without family, he said, his directness catching me off guard. I built a company worth millions and have no one to share it with. Over the following weeks we met regularly. I learned about Davidson Tech Solutions and how he'd built it from nothing. Each meeting felt less awkward than the last as we carefully constructed a fragile relationship. During our fourth meeting, he mentioned a partnership he was particularly proud of. It's with a footwear company looking to revolutionize their manufacturing technology. Reynolds, I believe. I nearly dropped my fork. Reynolds Footwear? Dominic Reynolds. Yes, that's him. Do you know him? The universe had a twisted sense of humor. He's my father-in-law. Skylar's expression shifted from surprise to concern. Your father-in-law? That's quite a coincidence. A cruel one, I admitted. He's been trying to destroy my confidence in my business since I married Austin. He thinks I'm beneath the Reynolds name. That doesn't align with the man I've met in business meetings, Skylar said carefully. That's because you're valuable to him, I replied. I'm just the stubborn daughter-in-law who won't fall in line. At our next lunch, Skylar mentioned casually, I've been reviewing the Reynolds contract more closely. His entire expansion plan depends on my technology and financing. Without this deal, his growth strategy completely falls apart. Something clicked in my mind, a possibility both frightening and thrilling. Lucy, Skylar said, watching my expression change, what are you thinking? I met his gaze directly. I'm thinking that after years of being powerless, I suddenly have access to the one thing Dominic Reynolds can't control. That afternoon, in a quiet corner of a forgettable diner, father and daughter began plotting. Not just revenge but justice. The systematic dismantling of Dominic Reynolds' empire piece by calculated piece. The chess game had begun and Dominic had no idea he wasn't the king he thought he was, but merely a pawn. The man I married was disappearing. I noticed it in small ways at first. Austin staying later at the office, taking calls from his father in another room, his defenses of me growing weaker until they stopped altogether. The night after my revelation with Skylar, Austin came home with news that confirmed my fears. Dad's putting me in charge of the new tech integration project, he announced, loosening his tie with uncharacteristic excitement. It's the biggest responsibility he's ever given me. That's great, I said, noticing how he avoided my eyes. Isn't that the project with Davidson Tech? Austin nodded, pouring himself a whiskey. Dad says it'll define the future of Reynolds Footwear. If I handle it right, he might consider me for CEO next year. I watched him carefully. And what about us moving forward with buying our own place? We talked about getting out from under your father's shadow. His expression hardened slightly. Lucy, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We need to put everything else on hold. Everything meaning my goals, I clarified. Not yours. That's not fair. Dad thinks. Dad thinks, I echoed. What do you think, Austin? When did you stop having your own opinions? The argument escalated quickly. Words were exchanged that couldn't be taken back. Austin slept in the guest room that night, and I realized with startling clarity that my husband had become a stranger. Dominic's perfect puppet. While Austin threw himself into work, I divided my time between keeping Lucid Designs afloat and researching Dominic's business empire. Under the guise of improving my entrepreneurial skills, I spent hours analyzing Reynolds Footwear's public financial reports, supply chain details and market strategies. Skylar provided insights that weren't publicly available. Information only a major investor would know. His entire European expansion hinges on three things, Skylar explained during one of our weekly lunch meetings. My technology, the Valmont leather supplier in Italy, and securing the Milano retail spaces before his competitor, Grayson, can move in. I took careful notes, developing a map of dependencies and vulnerabilities. What would happen if the Valmont deal fell through? Skylar's slight smile told me he appreciated my strategic thinking. It would delay production by at least 6 months. His board wouldn't be pleased. Our meetings became the highlight of my week. Not just for plotting but because I was developing a genuine connection with my father. We discovered shared interests in architecture and travel. He told me stories about my mother that I'd never heard, filling gaps in my understanding of who she was. She was the most determined person I ever met, Skylar said one afternoon, his eyes distant with memory. You have that same look when you're focused on something. These moments of connection made me question my motivations occasionally. Was I using Skylar to get back at Dominic? But each time Austin came home later, each time he repeated Dominic's opinions as his own, my resolve strengthened. 3 weeks into our planning, Austin announced another Reynolds family dinner. Dad wants to celebrate the first phase of the tech integration. You need to be there. I agreed without argument, which seemed to surprise him. What he didn't know was that I'd be meeting Skylar beforehand. The timing works perfectly, Skylar said when I told him. I've arranged a meeting with Jean Valmont tomorrow. He's been dissatisfied with Dominic's business practices for years but hasn't had a better option. Until now, I finished. Until now, Skylar confirmed. Your designs are exceptional, Lucy. Valmont will appreciate working with someone who understands quality and craftsmanship. The dinner at Dominic's mansion was more crowded than usual. Board members, executives, and their spouses filled the expansive dining room. I sat quietly beside Austin, observing how Dominic worked the room. The charm he displayed to important people contrasted sharply with how he treated those he deemed beneath him. I witnessed it firsthand when a young assistant approached with a folder of documents. Dominic glanced at them and exploded. These projections are completely wrong. Are you trying to make me look incompetent in front of my board? His voice carried across the room as the assistant, a woman probably my age, turned crimson. I'm sorry, Mr. Reynolds. I'll correct them immediately, she stammered. Don't bother, Dominic sneered. Austin, fix this mess. And find someone who knows basic math for next time. The young woman retreated, visibly fighting tears. Austin immediately took the folder and began reviewing the contents, not sparing a glance for the humiliated assistant. Later, I found her in the hallway still trying to compose herself. He does that to everyone, I said, offering her a tissue. It's not about you. She looked at me cautiously. You're Austin's wife, right? I nodded. I'm Lucy. He used to be different, she said quietly. Austin, I mean. When he first started, he would stand up to his father when he treated staff badly. Her words confirmed what I already knew but had been reluctant to fully accept. Austin wasn't just enabling his father. He was becoming him. The next morning, I met with Skylar and Jean Valmont at a small cafe downtown. Valmont, an elegant Italian man in his 60s, studied my design portfolio with interest. Your approach to combining modern design with traditional craftsmanship is refreshing, he said in accented English. But can you handle the scale I work with? That's where I come in, Skylar interjected smoothly. I'm prepared to finance Lucy's expansion to meet your production needs. Valmont looked between us. And what of my agreement with Reynolds? Their exclusivity clause expires next month, I replied, having done my homework. You're free to contract with additional partners after that. Dominic Reynolds will not be pleased, Valmont cautioned. I met his gaze steadily. Mr. Valmont, I'm offering better terms, more creative freedom, and a partnership that values your expertise. Can Dominic say the same? 2 hours later, I had secured my first major supplier. The same one Dominic was counting on for his European expansion. The chess piece had moved. Within days, Valmont would inform Reynolds Footwear that they could fulfill their current order but would be reducing their commitment for the upcoming season. When I returned home, I found Austin frantically working on his laptop. What's wrong? I asked, hiding my satisfaction behind concern. Supply chain issues, he muttered without looking up. Dad's going to explode when he finds out. I placed a sympathetic hand on his shoulder. I'm sure you'll figure it out. And as I walked away, I felt the first thread of Dominic's carefully woven empire begin to unravel. Another order from Boutique Elise in Chicago? I stared at my laptop screen in disbelief. That's their third bulk purchase this month. My small team of 3, myself, Jenny from design school, and Rita who handled our finances, gathered around my desk in our new office space. Yes, an actual office, not a converted storage room. The exposed brick walls and industrial windows gave Lucid Designs the professional atmosphere I'd always envisioned. And look at these online metrics, Rita pointed to our analytics dashboard. Traffic up 213% since the Valmont announcement. The fashion industry had taken notice when Valmont Leathers, supplier to luxury brands worldwide, partnered with my little hobby business. What no one knew was that Skylar had anonymously invested enough capital for me to expand operations, hire staff, and secure this downtown location. The investment firm called again, Jenny mentioned casually. They want to schedule another meeting about possibly backing your fall collection. The investment firm was another of Skylar's strategic moves, a legitimate business entity that served as a front for his financial support. We maintained a strictly professional relationship in public, careful not to reveal our connection. Schedule it for Thursday afternoon, I replied, trying to contain my excitement. And let's finalize the Milano samples. If we're going to disrupt the European market, we need to be ready. Jenny raised an eyebrow at the mention of Milano. Isn't that where Reynolds Footwear is trying to expand? I managed a casual shrug. Great minds think alike, I guess. That evening I arrived home to find Austin waiting for me, an increasingly rare occurrence. The tension in his posture was visible before he even spoke. Your company leased offices downtown? He held up a business magazine featuring a small piece on emerging local businesses. Lucid Designs was mentioned prominently. We needed the space, I replied, setting down my portfolio. With what money, Lucy? Last month you were working out of our apartment and barely making payroll. I'd prepared for this conversation. I secured private investment. People believe in what I'm creating. What people? Austin pressed. Dad says no serious investor would back a boutique operation like yours without seeing years of consistent growth. There it was again, Dad says. I bit back my instinctive retort and opted for a half-truth. Davidson Capital Management. They specialize in emerging designers. Austin's expression shifted from suspicion to confusion. Davidson? As in Skylar Davidson, Dad's tech partner. It's a large firm, I deflected. I doubt Mr. Davidson personally approves every investment. Austin paced our living room. This doesn't make sense. 6 months of struggling and suddenly you're expanding? Taking on Valmont as a supplier. His eyes narrowed. The same Valmont that just reduced their commitment to Dad's European production line? Business is unpredictable, I replied coolly. Something your father complains about constantly. He's been in a complete tailspin since Valmont pulled back, Austin admitted, running a hand through his hair. The board is questioning his expansion timeline. I feigned sympathy while savoring this first taste of justice. That must be difficult for him. The following week brought news of Dominic's first major public setback. The business press reported that Reynolds Footwear had lost exclusive rights to 3 prime retail locations in Milano, locations that had been verbally promised but never formally contracted. The spaces instead went to a consortium of emerging American designers. A group Skylar had quietly assembled with Lucid Designs as the anchor brand. Austin came home that night in a thunderous mood. Dad fired the entire Italian real estate team today, he reported, pouring himself a double whiskey. Said they were incompetent for losing those storefronts. I carefully arranged my expression. That seems harsh. Wasn't it just a verbal agreement? That's not how business works, Lucy, Austin snapped, sounding exactly like his father. When Dominic Reynolds is promised something, it happens. Or what? I challenged, my patience wearing thin. He throws a tantrum and fires innocent people? Austin stared at me, surprised by my directness. You don't understand the pressure he's under. The board is watching his every move since the Davidson deal was announced. And that justifies treating people like they're disposable? You're running a small business with 3 employees, Austin dismissed. Dad manages a global corporation with thousands of jobs at stake. The condescension in his voice broke something inside me. And that gives him the right to be cruel? To humiliate people? To crush anyone who doesn't fall in line with his plans, including his own son? Austin's jaw tightened. What's that supposed to mean? It means I miss my husband, I said quietly. The man who had his own dreams before Dominic drowned them out. The argument ended with Austin grabbing his keys and leaving. He didn't come home that night. Sunday dinner at the Reynolds mansion arrived with predictable tension. Dominic greeted Austin warmly but barely acknowledged my presence, until the topic of business came up. Milano was a temporary setback, Dominic assured everyone at the table. We're pursuing alternative locations that will serve us better in the long run. I heard a group of American designers secured those spaces, Dominic's wife Margaret mentioned innocently. Including some local talent. Dominic waved dismissively. Amateur hour. They'll be bankrupt within a year. Real estate in the fashion district requires serious capital and connections. I took a sip of wine to hide my smile. Sometimes smaller operations can be more nimble, I commented. Less bureaucracy to slow down decisions. Dominic's gaze locked onto me. Is that business advice, Lucy? From your extensive experience running a successful company. The old Lucy would have shrunk under his scrutiny. But I wasn't that person anymore. Actually, yes, I replied evenly. Lucid Designs secured Valmont as a supplier last month. We're expanding into 3 new markets this quarter and just leased downtown offices. Small doesn't mean unsuccessful. A stunned silence fell over the table. Austin stared at me with a mix of shock and something like betrayal. Dominic's face darkened. Valmont, he repeated coldly. Interesting coincidence. Not really, I challenged, meeting his gaze. They were looking for design-focused partners who value craftsmanship over mass production. Our philosophies aligned. Dominic's smile didn't reach his eyes. Well. It seems Austin's little wife has business aspirations after all. I'm not just Austin's wife, I corrected him firmly. I'm a business owner making my own connections and building my own success. The satisfaction of standing up to Dominic was exhilarating, but short-lived. The drive home with Austin was filled with suffocating silence. Later that night, as Austin slept, I sat alone in our living room questioning everything. The chess pieces were moving perfectly, Dominic was facing setbacks, my business was growing, and I'd finally stood my ground. Yet the cost was becoming increasingly clear. My marriage was collapsing. The man I loved was becoming a stranger. And despite the righteousness of my cause, deception left a bitter taste. I called Skylar, needing to hear a voice that understood. Am I becoming just like him? I whispered when he answered. Manipulating people, keeping secrets, putting business above relationships? The difference, Skylar replied gently, is that Dominic never questions his methods. The fact that you're asking shows you're nothing like him. His words comforted me, but as I watched Austin toss restlessly in our bed, I wondered if justice was worth losing the life I'd once wanted so desperately. Morning light filtered through our bedroom curtains as I lay awake beside Austin, who had finally returned late the night before. The distance between us felt like miles despite the inches separating our bodies. My phone vibrated on the nightstand. Another message from Skylar about our next move. Before I could check it, Austin's phone rang. Dad. Austin sat up immediately, fully alert. Yes, I can talk. I pretended to be asleep as Austin moved to the living room. When he returned 30 minutes later, his expression was unreadable. Dad's hosting a major event in Paris next month, he announced. A celebration of the Davidson Tech partnership and the European expansion. He wants us both there. I blinked in surprise. Both of us? He specifically asked for me to come. He insisted, actually. Austin's tone was suspicious. Said it would look bad if I showed up without my wife. Especially since other executives are bringing their spouses. The timing couldn't have been more perfect, or more suspect. 3 weeks earlier, Skylar had orchestrated a critical blow to Dominic's supply chain through a labor dispute at a key factory. Reynolds' footwear stock had dropped 12%. Why would Dominic be celebrating now? When is it? I asked casually. 2 weeks from Friday. We'll fly out Thursday morning and stay through the weekend at the Georges V. Austin scrutinized my face. Does that work with your suddenly booming business schedule? I ignored his sarcasm. I'll make it work. Later that day, I met Skylar at our usual cafe to discuss this unexpected development. It's not a celebration, Skylar confirmed, sliding a document across the table. It's damage control. He's gathered his top investors to reassure them the European expansion is on track despite recent temporary setbacks. And you're invited as his tech partner, I concluded. Skylar nodded. He doesn't suspect our connection. He's desperate to show a united front with Davidson Tech to keep investor confidence from crumbling further. I studied the guest list Skylar had procured. All the major players will be there. The perfect stage, Skylar agreed. Are you ready for this, Lucy? Once we make our move in Paris, there's no going back. The question hung between us. Was I ready? The revenge plot had consumed 6 months of my life, transformed my business and systematically dismantled my marriage. Yet Dominic Reynolds remained standing, arrogant and cruel as ever. I'm ready, I decided firmly. But there's one problem, Austin. For days I grappled with whether to tell Austin the truth before Paris. Each morning I woke determined to come clean, and each night I went to bed with the secret still locked inside me. I loved him once, part of me still did. But the man who shared my home now was more Reynolds than the Austin I married. 1 week before our departure, Austin arrived home with a small blue box. Early anniversary gift, he explained awkwardly, placing it on the kitchen counter between us. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet. I know things have been difficult lately. The gesture caught me off guard. It's beautiful, Austin. I thought you could wear it in Paris, he suggested, a flicker of the old Austin in his eyes. Maybe we could use this trip to reconnect. Get away from all the business stress. His sincerity made my chest ache. I'd like that. That night as Austin slept, I called Skylar in turmoil. I can't do this to him, I whispered, stepping onto our small balcony. Not without telling him the truth first. Think carefully, Lucy, Skylar cautioned. If you tell Austin everything now, he'll warn his father. Everything we've worked for could collapse. He's still my husband, I insisted. He deserves to know before his world falls apart in public. Skylar was silent for a moment. It's your decision. But remember who Austin has chosen to be these past months. Would he have shown you the same consideration? His question haunted me as the days passed. Austin and I circled each other cautiously, both sensing the approaching storm without acknowledging it. The night before our departure, I packed my suitcase with trembling hands, the weight of my decision pressing down on me. Morning came too quickly. Our car service to the airport arrived at dawn, and we traveled in silence until boarding. Austin seemed determined to maintain our temporary truce, handling travel arrangements with practiced efficiency. Dad's sending a car to meet us at Charles de Gaulle, he mentioned as we settled into our first-class seats, another Reynolds perk. We'll have time to freshen up at the hotel before the welcome reception tonight. I nodded, feigning interest in the safety demonstration while my mind raced through tomorrow's events. Skylar had finalized our plan yesterday. The documents were prepared, key players positioned, contingencies established. After months of careful maneuvering, everything would culminate in one decisive moment. Midway through the flight, Austin noticed my unusual calm. You seem different, he observed, studying my face. Normally you're anxious about seeing Dad, but today you're, I don't know, peaceful. I've realized some things can't be changed, I replied carefully. Your father will never respect me or my business. I've made peace with that. Austin frowned. He's been under tremendous pressure. These setbacks with suppliers, the Milano properties, factory issues. It's been one thing after another. Strange coincidences, I remarked. Dad thinks someone's deliberately targeting Reynolds' footwear, Austin confided, lowering his voice despite the privacy of first class. He's had security investigating possible corporate espionage. My heart stuttered, but I kept my expression neutral. That sounds paranoid. Austin shrugged. Maybe. But Dad's instincts about business threats are usually right. The conversation sent a chill through me. How close was Dominic to discovering the truth? Had our chess moves been too bold? Paris greeted us with unexpected sunshine. The drive from the airport to our hotel revealed the city in all its spring glory: flowering chestnut trees, cafe terraces filled with people, the Seine glittering beneath ornate bridges. Our suite at the Georges V was opulently French, gilt mirrors, silk damask, and windows overlooking the Champs-Élysées. In another life I might have been thrilled by such luxury. Now it felt like the elaborate setting for a final act. The welcome reception starts at 7, Austin reminded me, hanging up his suit. Dad's booked the entire rooftop restaurant at Le Muris. Everyone who matters in European fashion and retail will be there. I nodded, fingering the silver bracelet Austin had given me. I'll be ready. When we arrived at Le Muris that evening, the sun was setting over Paris, casting a golden glow across the rooftop. Crystal glasses caught the light, servers circulated with champagne, and the Eiffel Tower provided a picture-perfect backdrop. Dominic had spared no expense. This was a statement of power as much as a business function. I spotted him immediately, commanding attention at the center of the room. Despite recent setbacks, Dominic Reynolds exuded absolute confidence. His custom tuxedo, his booming laugh, the deferential way people approached him, everything reinforced his self-image as untouchable. "Ah, there's my son," Dominic called when he spotted us. "And Lucy looking almost fashionable for once." I smiled tightly as he kissed my cheek, the scent of expensive cologne and hubris overwhelming. "Quite the event, Dad," Austin commented, accepting a glass of champagne. "Nothing but the best for our European partners," Dominic replied. "We need to show them Reynolds' footwear isn't deterred by minor obstacles." His eyes lingered on me briefly, a flicker of suspicion quickly masked by practiced charm. Did he sense something? I suddenly wondered if I'd underestimated him all along. As Dominic moved away to greet new arrivals, I scanned the room for Schuyler. He stood near the balcony, engaged in conversation with several investors. Our eyes met briefly, a silent confirmation that everything was in place. Tomorrow night at the formal dinner, the final piece would move. The chess game would end. And Dominic Reynolds wouldn't know what hit him. I slept fitfully in our luxury suite, waking before dawn to watch Paris come alive from our balcony. Today everything would change. I'd rehearsed this moment countless times in my mind, yet nothing could truly prepare me for what lay ahead. "You're up early," Austin commented, joining me with coffee. "Nervous about tonight?" "Just appreciating the view," I deflected, accepting the cup he offered. This small kindness, remembering exactly how I took my coffee, reminded me of our early days together. "Dad's in rare form," he warned. "The investors seem convinced by his confidence, but he's on edge. The pressure's getting to him." I nodded, saying nothing. Let Dominic enjoy his final hours of control. The day passed in a blur of sightseeing, a facade of normalcy as Austin and I strolled along the Seine, visited the Louvre and shared lunch at a sidewalk cafe. If he noticed my distraction, he didn't mention it. Perhaps he was lost in his own thoughts too. "I've been thinking about us," Austin said suddenly as we crossed the Pont d'Arts. "About how things used to be before Dad pulled me deeper into the company." My heart stuttered. And I miss us," he admitted quietly. "I don't like who I've become, Lucy." The sincerity in his voice nearly broke my resolve. For a moment I considered calling Schuyler, canceling our plan, giving Austin another chance. But then he continued. "After this Paris event, Dad wants me to head the Asian expansion. It would mean relocating to Singapore for at least a year." "Us or just you?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Austin didn't meet my eyes. "He thinks it would be better if I focused entirely on business. No distractions." And there it was, confirmation that nothing had really changed. Austin would always choose Dominic's approval over our marriage. "We should head back to the hotel," I said, my decision solidified. "We need to get ready for tonight." The formal dinner was held in a private chateau outside Paris, a 17th-century estate Dominic had rented exclusively for the occasion. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the grand ballroom, string musicians played softly in the corner, and elegantly dressed waitstaff circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I wore a black gown, one of my own designs, with Austin's silver bracelet as my only jewelry. Schuyler arrived separately, giving me a barely perceptible nod as he greeted various business associates. Dominic commanded attention at the head table, surrounded by his most important guests. Austin and I were seated nearby, Close enough to be observed but not close enough to participate in the primary conversations. A calculated placement that reflected my status in Dominic's world. When dinner was served, Dominic rose for a toast. The room immediately quieted. "Friends, partners, esteemed colleagues," he began, his voice carrying effortlessly. "Tonight we celebrate not just a business milestone but a vision. Reynolds Footwear has weathered recent challenges with the resilience that defines true industry leaders." Murmurs of approval rippled through the gathering. "With Davidson Tech as our partner," he continued, raising his glass toward Schuyler, "our European expansion continues despite the efforts of those who sought to undermine us." His gaze swept the room, lingering momentarily on me before moving on. Did he suspect? The thought sent a chill through me. To the future of Reynolds Footwear across Europe and beyond. Glasses clinked as guests applauded. Dominic basked in the adulation, every inch the victorious CEO. As the main course was served, he worked the room, stopping at our table last. "Austin, the Singapore arrangements are finalized," he announced loudly. "The board unanimously approved your leadership of the Asian division." "That's wonderful news," Austin replied with practiced enthusiasm. Dominic turned to me with a smirk. "Don't worry, Lucy. While Austin builds our family legacy in Asia, you can continue playing with your little dress shop." I maintain my composure. "Lucid Designs is hardly little anymore, Dominic. We're opening our Milano location next month." His expression tightened. "Milano? Interesting coincidence." "Not really," I replied evenly. "Good business opportunities tend to attract multiple investors." "Investors," Dominic repeated, his voice taking on a dangerous edge. "Yes, you've had quite the streak of mysterious good fortune lately. Almost as if someone with intimate knowledge of Reynolds Footwear has been guiding your decisions." The table fell silent. Austin looked between us, confusion evident on his face. "What are you suggesting, Dad?" Dominic ignored him, focusing entirely on me. "Tell me, Lucy, how does a failing boutique owner suddenly secure Valmont Leather Milano retail space and factory capacity that was previously committed to Reynolds contracts? The same resources that mysteriously became unavailable to us. The moment had arrived sooner than I'd anticipated. Dominic had connected more dots than I realized. "Perhaps I'm simply a better negotiator than you gave me credit for," I suggested calmly. Dominic's laugh was harsh. "Or perhaps you've been sleeping with one of my competitors. That would explain Austin's relocation, keeping my son away while you undermine his family's business." Austin stood abruptly. "Dad, that's enough." "Is it?" Dominic challenged, his voice rising. "Your wife has systematically targeted our expansion plans while her own business mysteriously thrives. Open your eyes, son." The surrounding tables had gone quiet, guests watching the unfolding drama with poorly disguised interest. "You know what your wife is, Austin? My biggest mistake. I should have forbidden this marriage the moment you brought home this conniving social climbing." "That's quite enough, Dominic." The voice came from behind us. Schuyler Davidson stood there, his expression cold and controlled. "This is a private family matter, Schuyler," Dominic said dismissively. "Business discussion can wait until tomorrow." "On the contrary," Schuyler replied, moving to stand beside me. "This is very much my business." Dominic's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" "Lucy isn't undermining your business through corporate espionage or infidelity," Schuyler stated clearly. "She's doing it with my full knowledge and support." The room had gone completely silent, all pretense of privacy abandoned. "Actually," Schuyler continued, placing a protective hand on my shoulder, "that's my daughter you're insulting." The words landed like a physical blow. Dominic staggered back a step, his face draining of color as he looked between us, suddenly seeing the resemblance that had been there all along. "Your daughter," Austin whispered, staring at me with dawning comprehension. "Yes," I confirmed, meeting his gaze steadily. "I only discovered it myself 6 months ago." Dominic recovered quickly, his shock transforming to calculation. "This changes nothing about our partnership, Schuyler. Family sentimentality shouldn't interfere with business." "On the contrary," Schuyler replied calmly. "I'm withdrawing all Davidson Tech support from Reynolds Footwear, effective immediately. The contracts, as you'll find in Section 16B, allow for termination under certain conditions." "This is absurd." Dominic sputtered, his composure cracking. You can't. I believe the board will be particularly interested in the evidence of workplace harassment we've documented, Schuyler continued. Not to mention the creative accounting regarding Asian production costs. Dominic's face turned an alarming shade of red. Several board members were now moving toward our table, expressions grave. In that moment of perfect justice I felt strangely hollow. Revenge, after consuming my every thought for months, tasted ashen in victory. Austin stood frozen, betrayal etched across his features. You planned this, he said quietly. All of it. Yes, I admitted. There was no point in lying now. After years of watching your father demean me, control you, and hurt countless others without consequence. The pain in Austin's eyes cut deeper than I'd expected. You used me. No more than you allowed your father to use you against me, I replied softly. In the chaos that followed, Dominic being escorted out by board members, guests whispering furiously, photographers from the business press capturing the meltdown, Austin and I stood apart, the wreckage of our marriage laid bare between us. Later that night I stood alone in our hotel suite, watching the lights of Paris shimmer below. Austin had moved to another room, needing space to process everything. I couldn't blame him. Schuyler had offered me his private jet back to the States whenever I was ready. Lucid Designs was secure, its future bright without the shadow of Dominic Reynolds looming over it. I had won. Yet victory felt complicated. In destroying Dominic, I'd become capable of calculated deception. In seeking justice, I'd employed methods that troubled my conscience. The line between righteous vengeance and simple revenge had blurred somewhere along the way. As dawn broke over Paris, I made peace with the contradictions. I couldn't undo my choices, but I could determine what came next. There would be no more chess games, no more secret manipulations. Whatever I built from here, business, relationships, perhaps even a reconciliation with Austin if he could ever forgive me, would be founded on transparency. Dominic Reynolds had called me his biggest mistake. Perhaps in the end his biggest mistake was underestimating exactly whose daughter I was.